Hang in
Dude,
there, it is.
that's Smylie Kaufman for 61. Wow.
I'm Smylie Kaufman, and this is The Smylie Show.
Welcome back to The Smylie Show, where our Ryder Cup preview continues today with a really cool conversation featuring Smylie and Graeme McDowell. Checking some first boxes on the show, Smylie. Always fun doing that. But I really, the thing that I love the most was did not understand or fully appreciate the depth of your familial connection to Graeme McDowell and how far back you two really go.
Yeah, not a lot of people know that Graeme McDowell played college golf at UAB for my granddad. So I've known Graeme since I was like 8 or 9 years old. He's always been somebody that's been my favorite player. You know, he was a mentor to me when I got out on the professional golf tour, helped me out in college. So we talk a little bit about that in the interview. But of course, too, this guy's had just an incredible Ryder Cup career, incredible professional career. But the Ryder Cup specifically, he's had some key moments that he talks about in this interview, being a part of 3 winning teams, being a part of the captaincy side, being vice captain a couple of different times. So just the amount of depth of this conversation of stories, experience as we head to the Ryder Cup next week is as good of a setup as you possibly could have for what is to come next week at Bethpage and maybe what to expect a little bit from the European side that we've talked a lot about the U.S. side, so kind of give a little different perspective for maybe how the European side thinks was a great way to set us up for next week.
Normally we just get right to this interview. So why are we here talking to you right now? Well, that's because we have to give you a production disclaimer here. We can't always get the tech quite right. We've been working through it this past few weeks behind the scenes.
We have been on that run where you show up to your flight, like you get to the airport, you get checked in, and then you get a text, flight delayed. Like we've been on a lost baggage, delayed flight production side of what we've been dealing with over the last like 5 or 6 interviews. We apologize. It's one of those ones we couldn't really help this time because there was no other solution. So Charlie, I'll let you kind of explain it to them as I'm not the tech guru. I just know how to connect my AirPods. I
won't bore people with the tech details. Just know that we tried to address the situation, and unfortunately, this was the best audio solution that you'll hear. You might get some popping, some spaces in Graeme's audio. About 80% of it remains intact, and that 80% is very, very good. So we wanted to apologize, put the disclaimer out there. Bear with us. Enjoy this conversation because it's a really fun one between Smylie and Graeme McDowell. So unless you have anything to add, Smylie, I think we should get people right to that chat right now.
Right to G Mac and cheese. Let's do it. Welcome back to the Smylie Show as we continue on with our Ryder Cup coverage. And we have quite the guest today, Graeme McDowell, Ryder Cup legend, and a very close little friend. He was also a mentor of mine growing up playing collegiate golf for my granddad at UAB. And Graeme, we have to start there. How does a guy from Northern Ireland, Portrush, end up in Birmingham, Alabama, playing for my granddad, who, with all due respect, wasn't necessarily the best developer of talent. Now, he could take you to a good restaurant, but I mean, just wild how you two ended up together and you ended up in Birmingham.
Yeah, Smylie, great to be on with you, and love what you're doing. I probably met you when you were pretty small, right? Out at your granddad's house there. It's blank on the golf course. Vestavia Country Club. I can still picture the little dogleg par 4 that you guys that you had at the house. But Chris Devlin, obviously, I think Mike Dunphy signed Chris Devlin.
Oh, okay.
Dunphy was a little bit of an out of the box kind of guy, and he managed to sign Chris Devlin, who was another Northern Irish player. And and obviously when your granddad took over the program, he was looking for some other players, and Chris gave him a few phone numbers, and I think I was the first guy he called.
The story goes from his side was that he was calling about somebody else, and not even, maybe it wasn't Devlin, maybe it was somebody else. And somebody said, well, we got this guy named Graeme McDowell. Do you want to talk to him? He's like, yeah, sure. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, I was probably somewhere on the list. I may have been a little further down the list than I wanted to be. And I was actually in university back in Ireland, but I really wanted to play golf in the States, because all my buddies had gone. They'd all gone to Toledo but Toledo had run out of scholarship money and I couldn't afford to go. And so then my mom was like, yeah, go get an education and you can play golf afterwards. I was like, okay, Mom. And then Coach Kaufman called me. I was November of my year in college in Belfast in Northern Ireland, and he said, come over and have a look at UAB and maybe play for us. And I said, yes, sir. That's pretty much what I want to do. And I knew before I set the plane. Although I always tell people, and this is a true story, I literally didn't know Alabama from Alaska, from Florida, from New York. I had no clue about college sports. I'd never been to the States before. I literally had no idea what D1 was, what junior college was. It was a voyage of discovery. And I look back at the 3 years that I spent at UAB as a big turning point in my life. Your granddad really, he took me from a pretty raw talent. I was a decent player. I wasn't particularly standout or special. Those 3 years, I grew a lot, outwards and mentally. And, on the freshman, what do they call it? The freshman 15, I think I was good for about freshman 25 and a really bad Southern drawl on top of my Northern Irish accent, which people find very humorous to this day. But it was a big turning point in my life. I was number 1 ranked Division I player my last year at UAB, and I think I won 6 times. And it was great, man. It was, I genuinely believe that without UAB, I wouldn't be sitting with a US Open trophy on my shelf in my office. I wouldn't have done anything like what I've achieved in my career. I really believe that.
I think I was around 9, 10, 11 years old when you were in college at UAB. So my memories are pretty faint, but I do remember my dad and my granddad just talking all the time about how good this player could be, Graeme McDowell. And of course, you would sometimes come over to Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner, if you didn't go all the way back to home in Ireland. So it was a family for so many European players that would come over to play for my granddad at UAB. That, I mean, there's countless guys that I still either run into to this day that played for UAB. I'm like, yep. Maybe from Christmas dinner, like Jason Shufflebob comes to mind.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my first Thanksgiving in the U.S., I spent it at your granddad's house at Vestavia. And,
first off, apologies. My grandmother, rest in peace. It was probably the driest turkey you're ever going to eat in your life. Now, meanwhile, my granddad's over there. He's got the whole turkey leg, the best piece of the turkey, and he's just gnawing at it. And we over here, we need all of the water in Alabama to try to get this dry turkey down.
I'm pretty sure we were probably over there in the corner, bust into the cooler and see what we could find at the bottom of the cooler.
That's fair. That's fair.
19, 20-year-old college kids, just trying to steal a beer from somewhere. But no, your dad, he was amazing. I always giggle to myself because, I would become a decent putter in my professional career. But when I first came to the States and started putting on greens at, faster than 11 in the stimp that I'd never really seen before, I used to give Coach K absolute connection. He'd go, I'd be drilling these things 5-6 feet by the hole all day, and he would lose his mind. I remember get very frustrated about the way I putted, and I definitely had a little bit of sort of some things to work out when I came to the States. How to, the short game and putting on some quicker greens like Old Overton out there. They used to get those things like running beautifully. And like I say, it was a big transition in my life and learning how to play the game a bit differently. But I used to give your granddad some heart attacks watching me hit putts for sure.
He used to just stand too close to the hole, honestly, most of the time. And he would just watch you putt. And as soon as it came off the face, he would go, whoa, 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 whoa. And just immediately it would make you angry as a player because, you don't want anybody talking to your golf ball, especially when it hasn't stopped rolling. He still has a chance to go in. And then, of course, the verbal frustrations that he would always have his walking chair with him. So if Graeme hit the ball in the water or a UAB player hit the ball in the water, or if I hit the ball in the water when he's watching, he's slamming that thing down. And he was one of a kind. And I know you probably have 1 or 2 good stories from my granddad, either driving the van or stories like that of getting frustrated on the golf course.
Well, one of my favorite frustrated in the golf course stories from your granddad was, I think we were at regionals, or I can't remember where it was. It might have been like, but I'm on the 18th hole. I'll never forget it. And I see him up there by the green, and he's watching us hitting our approach shot. And my playing partner, misses it, kind of like short sides himself. Terrible shot, you know. And I see Coach K up there. He slams his umbrella into the ground. And I start laughing myself, and I say to my playing partner, like, my coach thinks that's me that just hit that shot. I haven't hit it yet. So that was a moment for sure. Right, if he had an umbrella in his hand and the greens were particularly grainy, he'd be over there like on the side of the green, like scraping the green with his umbrella. And I'm like, Coach, you can't do that, you know. He's over there sweeping at the green, you know. I'm like, oh my God. But he was a beaut. He wore his heart in his sleeve, and like I say,
sure did.
I think probably one of my favorite moments. I have so many Coach K moments, like the van, like that sitting at the one of those Dodge vans. You know, we used to have an over/under how many U-turns we'd make on a road trip, and stuff like that.
And digging out the car too, I imagine too.
Oh yeah, he definitely put a few dents in there. I'm not going to throw him under the proverbial bus there, but when I won Alabama's tournament my last year, I played with JB Holmes all 3 rounds, and JB.
Is it Old Overton? Is this Old Overton?
No, this was Alabama's event down. What was their golf course called down there? The University Track in Tuscaloosa.
Old Colony.
That was it. Old Colony.
Yeah,
and I play with JB every round of those 2 days, and he didn't make a bogey until the 15. I'm about 4 back with about 4 to go, and JB hasn't made a bogey. I make a couple of birdies. I get within 2. I stand up on 16, which was a par 3, and I'm between wedge and 9-iron. And Coach K goes to me, it's a wedge. I think the boys are hitting wedges, So sure enough, I hit this wedge, and I make it.
Oh.
And JB hits in the bunker and makes his first bogey of the tournament, and I go on to beat him by like 1 or 2. But Coach K was always like,
"How about that club?
Listen to me. You got that club, baby. You got to listen to me more often."
Oh gosh! Oh man, I miss him a lot. I know he was always your biggest fan. The amount of times that he would either call my dad or call me and say, "Hey, did you see what how he played over on the European Tour this week?" And all of a sudden, you're playing on the PGA Tour, having success. Next thing you know, you're winning a major championship. So it was fun, man, watching you grow up. You're always a hero of mine. Being somebody that I watch. Grow up and have all this success, and inspired me, honestly, to play professionally. And so the next part of this conversation I want to take us to, and I apologize here as Charlie's going to eventually show this photo, is that you were a mentor to me and brought me down over to Orlando. If you're watching on YouTube now, you see this photo. This is like a sophomore college LSU Smylie Kaufman, and then we got a seasoned veteran Graeme McDowell. What do you remember about this day, man, besides the fact that this camera or this photo was taken with a toaster?
Yeah, I mean, you were always taller than me, even when you were like 12 years old, huh? I mean, look at that. I guess I'm a little short there, but I just remember like, you've got that infectious kind of smile, that enthusiasm about the game. And I just remember you coming down, we played golf. I think you came back to the house and out for a little bit. And you were just so great and so enthusiastic about the game. And listen, your family's meant a huge amount to me in my career. I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for your family. So, obviously getting an opportunity to be able to give back to the family and kind of help steer you a little bit was obviously something I was pretty proud of.
Oh, Graeme, I learned a lot that day because I was not a very good driver of the golf ball at the time. And you actually gave me one of your backup drivers, and I used it for, probably the next 4 years until it cracked. And I actually have it right here. If you want to take a peek at this bad boy. All right, we got the Cleveland Classic, if anybody remembers this beauty. And if we get the right lighting, this is where you can see this thing went off. Can you see the crack in the face about right there in the top half?
Yeah. See, I was never fast enough to crack anything, but there you go. I mean, you're always pretty fast. Those hips were.
This is when you know it's yours. Speed. You see the tape. This is
a piece of heel tape.
So what did this do? I still don't know why I had lead tape on the heel of my driver, but I did because you did. Like, this is the driver you gave me as your backup, and I eventually started driving the absolute out of the golf ball. But why the heel tape? Why did this thing work for me?
So, interesting. I mean, I could go get my Titleist driver out of the garage right now, and it will have a piece of heel tape on it. And it's just, it's became one of those weird little habits, right? I mean, going back to, winning the U.S. Open in 10 with an F3 Callaway, and I had a piece of heel tape on there, and my coach had written with a T on the lead tape. He had written "come," like as in keep your transition calm. So he wrote this little message to me on the piece of lead tape. And, I had that piece of lead tape on there forever. And pretty much every driver I've ever had subsequently, I've always put that little bit of heel. It's one of those little weird kind of like, little things that we do. There's absolutely probably zero reason to it anymore. I mean, to be honest with you, I like to try and hit my driver the other way. So a piece of heel tape makes absolutely zero sense. If you want to hit fades, you should probably put it on the toe. But just one of those weird idiosyncrasies. But that Cleveland Classic, that was a driver's that thing for years.
I mean, we were collecting these Cleveland Classic drivers, especially when they stopped making them and going into different versions of the driver. I was on eBay. I was trying to find any head that I could because I wasn't ready to move on from this beauty. I mean, it made a different sound. People, when they would look at it, they're like, not a fan of this. But the people that did hit it, like yourself, Keegan Bradley, myself, we swore by it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I'm sure we'll talk about Keegan a little bit, but Keegan and I mean, I've been with Cleveland Srixon now for 15 years. And I mean, it goes all the way back to my UA days with Dunphy, Mike Dunphy, who's, long being a Srixon Cleveland rep and obviously out there on the developmental tour, helped me a lot over my career. And I remember being back in college and we'd call Dunphy up when we needed some fresh wedges. And, he'd bring us around the house and, we'd have a couple of beers and listen to some dump. And then maybe we'd get to go to the garage and go through the old bags and grab some wedges out of there. But, I played Cleveland for a big chunk of my career. And, still to this day, being with Srixon Cleveland, great company. Interestingly, Keegan and I, we've always been really like spookily similar on driver setup, and the way we look at golf balls. And Keegan would always like, when Srixon brought a new ball out or they brought a new driver out, like he would always text me or call me and be like, what are you seeing? Like, well, what's this driver doing? He'd be kind of bouncing ideas off me just about kind of the way we saw the stuff because him and I, even though, he's probably 10, 15 mile an hour ball speed faster than I am, but, for some reason, we've had spookily similar setups on our drivers. We always kind of pretty much use the same golf balls as well. So him and I, we go back a long time and still speak and still text, and obviously proud of, what he's done, this year, and obviously super to see what's going to happen next week. I think he's going to be a great captain, and he's a good friend.
Yeah, actually, let's get into this Ryder Cup stuff with Keegan Bradley and with Keegan. It was kind of for a bit there. It always felt like this Ryder Cup was going to be Tiger Woods as the captain at Bethpage. And when Keegan Bradley was announced, I think you maybe like myself were like, yeah, I see it as a good fit, but also Keegan Bradley's playing really good golf right now. How is this going to work? What were your initial thoughts when you saw that Keegan was named as the captain of this U.S. Ryder Cup team?
Yeah, I mean, I'm skeptical in the beginning, because, Keegan's obviously still a great player. And, it felt like it was a bit of a deviation away from standard pro, I guess, a little bit. I mean, Zach Johnson's obviously, he's not one of the older guys either, I suppose. And, he was captain in Rome, right? But Keegan, I mean, to me, being still an active, competitive player, I thought it was quite an aggressive choice. And, to me, the most surprising thing is the way he's managed to play over the last 12 to 18 months with, the weight of a Ryder Cup on his shoulders and everything that goes into all the activation with corporate sponsors and all the planning, everything to the modern day Ryder Cup. It's such a massive thing, right? Trying to create the environment for the players, hotels and locker rooms and clubhouses and just everything that we know that kind of goes into a Ryder Cup. So the fact that he's been able to play the way he has and obviously play his way into a position where, if it's another captain, is Keegan Bradley on the 12? Yeah, I think most people's opinion is absolutely. Yeah. He deserves to. He played to a level where he is one of the 12 players that should be going to Bethpage Black next week. I actually watched the live press conference, and as he was making his picks, I think it was when he picked Ben Griffin, I kind of said to myself, he's not picking himself here. And
I think you and I both, as soon as that was the pick, I thought that was the guy that might get left off the team, although nobody had earned their way on the team more than Ben, though, with how he had played this year.
For sure, and that's absolutely no disrespect to Ben Griffin, but sure. I kind of felt like Keegan was going to go down the list a little bit, and I kind of felt like he maybe jumped, and then when he jumped to Ben, who I thought was going to be in around 11 or 12 as far as maybe ranking the order of the players that get picked, when he jumped to him, I said to myself, oh my God, he's not going to pick himself, which, was one part kind of a little bit of a shock, a little bit kind of a disappointment, because we're like, first playing captain since Arnold Palmer in 67 or 69, whatever it was. And it would have been unbelievably exciting to see him go there next week and try and be playing captain. Would have been historic stuff. Right. So, but then, when I sat back and thought about it a little bit, it felt like to me, and this is just my opinion, that he was in a damned if he does, damned if he doesn't situation, because if he picks himself as a playing captain, huge amount of pressure goes on to his shoulders going into there next weekend, right? And like an unfair amount of expectation and pressure, because if he doesn't produce and he doesn't play well, it's like, well, he shouldn't have done it. Nobody can do both in the modern era because of the asks on the captain and the amount of stuff that the captain has to do off the golf course, media, press, corporate, all the planning, all the team stuff, right? So, if he picks himself and plays badly, he just sets himself up for disaster, and to me, that was just too much pressure to handle. Basically, he obviously could have picked himself and played well, and the team wins, and he's a hero forever, right? But and it's legendary stuff. But to me, I felt like I thought the way he handled the press conference. I mean, I think he just, he's such class. He really felt like he was going to do the greatest job that he could for Team America by stepping aside and being the captain for these 12 guys and being the best captain that he could be. Because, to try and do both, something's got to give. There's got to be a 10% or a 20% maybe give on one side or the other. Maybe he's not going to play as much golf as he should because he's got, expectations off the course. So it was a really tough scenario. And I felt like he the only decision, in my opinion, that he could covered himself in a huge amount of class by the way he conducted himself and the way he explained his decision making. And I think to go in there next week being led by a guy who's going to do a phenomenal job.
Yeah, he's been extremely thoughtful and very good with communication throughout the entire process. I thought the press conference, he spoke entirely well about every single player and his decision-making on why every player that was picked. But there's also feels like there's been a little bit of mind games. Maybe I'm looking too much into this side, but when Rory was asked about the possibility of being a playing captain moving forward, he said, no, that's not something that I would do. I've actually already, theoretically turned that down, potentially being a playing captain. Do you feel like the European side, maybe outside of Rory, was cheering for Keegan potentially to play, just to feel like it would weaken the team a little bit, knowing how difficult that challenge would be to be a playing captain?
I think it introduced a little bit of chaos to the U.S. side. I think just the mental chaos that it was creating, Willie or won't be. I think the Europeans probably enjoyed it. I'm not sure Rory kind of teed that one up to playing mind games per se. I think Rory was, just being Rory, gets asked every question under the sun, and eventually that one was going to come up. And, I think, obviously 27 in Ireland, Rory McIlroy playing captain, be pretty radical, be pretty legendary stuff. And he's obviously, thinking to himself that, he wouldn't have the capacity to be able to do both of those things in Ireland. And, and he's probably just thinking out loud, just like, no, I've thought about it and I wouldn't do it. But having a home Ryder Cup in Ireland, Rory McIlroy, one of the greatest players ever played the game, being a playing captain. That's just such a huge chaotic situation with a massive amount of work to do there. So, but no, I say the European team probably enjoyed the drama that was around the whole Keegan
Bradley. The group
Bradley
chat had to be popping off. It was probably here we go, another article.
Sure. Yeah,
just chaos, like you kind of talk about.
Yeah, and those are a real thing. The old WhatsApp groups, they're flying around, and I'm sure the boys were having a pretty good themselves. But, I'm sure there was an air of disappointment in the European team room when Keegan decided that he was going to take a step aside and obviously try and be the best captain he can be. So, I'm sure themselves, though, for a while.
And I want to talk about your Ryder Cup career because you played in 4, you were on a part of 3 winning teams. And the first one that you qualified for was 2008. This is at Valhalla. And coming into that 2008 Ryder Cup, I believe Europe had dominated the last 3 Ryder Cups prior to that. So there was a huge emphasis in the U.S. side. I believe it was Azinger was the captain that week. There was a lot of emphasis on the pods and trying to get the team to play for one another. You had Tiger, of course, being the best player the world, but they haven't necessarily had any of the results with having Tiger and Phil, the top 2 players in the world at the time, translate to a successful Ryder Cup. What do you remember about that first Ryder Cup at Valhalla? How much the U.S. side needed to win that Ryder Cup, and just maybe your overall experience of how nervous you were playing in your first one?
Yeah, no, I mean, great memories. I mean, like you mentioned, I've played 4 Ryder Cups, and they're all like really special in their own way. I put them all up in the same level, and that includes Valhalla, where we got beat pretty good there. But it was my first experience. I was a rookie, and Nick Fowler was the captain, one of my heroes in the 90s growing up, and there were so many different elements to that week, and I was so inexperienced in many ways that I didn't really understand the kind of mechanics of what makes a great week. The vice captains, the role they play. We didn't really have any vice captains that week at Valhalla. Faldo was kind of pretty much, his own guy. And, every captain kind of has their own thumbprint they put on things. But, I loved every Valhalla. But Zinger was obviously all over it, right? Pod system, putting one vice captain with a set of 3 guys, and really making sure it nearly had, solid coverage there, making sure communication levels were great. And I guess that's one of the things I've learned as the years have gone on, that when you have 12 players in a room, and see if those players flow from a Tiger Woods to a Boo Weekley who played no weight, you've got 12 different personalities, you've got 12 different egos, you've got 12 different guys that want different things. And you've got guys that are very rigid in their schedules. They need to know exactly what's asked of them for that weekend, and you can't really throw them any curveballs because they go, wow, I was ready for that, And then you have players that are absolutely ready to do anything that's asked of them, and they're very flexible, very fluid. And that's like one of the little psychology things that I feel like I've picked up over the years, kind of being part of Ryder Cups, that the way that the captains and the vice captains manage each individual is hugely important, because you got to talk to Tiger Woods a little differently from maybe how you talk to Phil, from how you talk to like I say, Boo Weekley. I'm not sure why I'm picking Boo out. We're talking about Valhalla, and I'm seeing him riding the cowboy kind of driver off one of the boxes. I mean, that was legendary Boo at his finest. But Valhalla was interesting. I mean, they beat us pretty good, and they had a good team. It's weird. I'm trying to think. Did Tiger play that Ryder Cup? Or, of course he did.
I'm pretty certain that he did play in that Ryder Cup. I can double check as you're talking here, as I got all this stuff pulled up right here.
It's so weird. I'm visualizing it in my mind. I certainly didn't play him in my matches, but I just can't remember him being there, and I'm trying to work out why.
He did not. He didn't. He did not play in 2008. Phil Mickelson was looks like their top qualifiers: Steve Stricker, Justin Leonard, Stuart Sink, Hunter Mahan, JB, Anthony Kim, Boo Weekley, Ben Curtis, Chad Campbell, Jim Furyk, and Kenny Berry.
Got it. So it was weird, I hadn't probably thought about that, maybe in 15 years, but the fact that Tiger was obviously hurt that year, so he didn't play. But it was an amazing Ryder Cup. I remember my first match I played with Padraig Harrington on Friday afternoon in the better ball match. The first tee, was very, 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 very nervous. It was actually kind of a big spread out first tee. Some of the tee boxes are like cauldrons now, and it's I'm curious to see what Bethpage looks like next week. But they're really making the first tee into something really big and special. And back in 08, it was kind of a big spread out tee box, so it wasn't crazy. But I remember I ripped it down the middle in the first hole in the better ball match, and I got up there and I was sitting in the middle of a divot, and I was like, well, but I actually lost my first match with Harry. I played with Miguel Jimenez. So the next morning we got a match against Leonard and Mahan, I believe, and Paul beat Perry in the afternoon, and then I beat Sink in the singles. But I remember playing the singles match against Sink, and we lost the Ryder Cup a couple holes in front of me. I was on the 16th tee, and I was a couple up, and I heard the cheer coming back, that it was over. And I remember it felt like one just sucked the life out of my body. And all the adrenaline that I had built up all over the weekend felt like it was gone in like a second, because it was done, it was over, and I ended up winning my match, but like it was such an anticlimax in the end, But it was a great weekend. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the captain. To me, there's a lot of emphasis put on the captain. The heroes and the villains that I've been part of over the last sort of 20 years. That captains have been thrown under the bus for not doing great jobs, and captains have been put up on pedestals because they did such an amazing created an amazing environment for the guys. But to me, it's such a small part of what makes the Ryder Cup competitive is the job the captain does. I mean, he picks his 12 guys. Obviously putting the pairings together is a little bit of an art form too. But like after that, it's really
got to play well.
It comes down to who holds putts. It's like I was part of Harrington at Whistling Straits. I was one of his vice captains, and I thought Padraig did a phenomenal job that week, and I was a big part of it. Obviously, part of the mechanics of the week. The team room was phenomenal. The buzz inside of the team room, the camaraderie, great team, great bunch of guys, and they got absolutely hammered. Does that mean? Oh, well, they got hammered on Sunday night, but I mean they got hammered in the match as well. But
that's fair. I think that's fair for any Ryder Cup.
I want to say it was a historic loss. It was the biggest loss since it went to Europe versus America. And you think to yourself, did Harrington do a bad job? And the answer, I would categorically say no. He did not do a bad job. He did a great job, and the camaraderie inside of the team room was phenomenal.
Yeah.
So that's to me is an example of kind of the attention the captains get. At the end of the day, if the team plays great, they've got a chance to win. If they play badly as a team, they're going to lose.
So you talked a little bit about maybe being a little unprepared for what to expect as a player in that 2008 Ryder Cup. And Graeme, I'm curious, was there anything that you learned or picked up through that first Ryder Cup experience, things that maybe you weren't expecting to inherit as far as information goes from veterans on that team on how to handle certain matches, whether it's momentum, certain things to do and not do, that maybe you weren't prepared for heading into the Ryder Cup, but after that Ryder Cup heading in to the next one, you're like, yep, I know exactly how to handle myself as far as the ebbs and swings of Ryder Cup matches?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's a very kind of apt question, kind of, as the European team goes into a New York crowd next week, I think it's going to be something a little special, a little different. And I think the crowd interaction is something that you have to learn how to deal with. And I remember being in that match on Friday afternoon with Harrington. I made a nice putt on from the back of the 8th green, the par 3 from about 20 feet. And I'm kind of like fist pumping, and then I realized that no one's clapping at all. I'm like, this is,
you're not used to that. You're not used to it.
Yeah. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. If it's a decent sized crowd, doesn't matter who you are. They might give you well done. But
Sure.
I realized that no one was reacting to this putt. In fact, they hated it, and it took me a second to kind of be like, that was really weird. But then obviously you play subsequent Ryder Cups, you play back in Europe, and you're just walking onto the green and they go bananas, and so it's there's different styles of energy, obviously playing an away Ryder Cup in America, you're not going to be able to take any energy from the crowd, and that's something we talk to the players about back in when you're playing in Europe. It's like if you're having a moment on the course where you've had a couple of bad holes or something, you can kind of let the crowd kind of energize you back up again. You can kind of use their vibe and use their noise to try to kind of charge the batteries back up again. And obviously you don't have that ability when you're in the States because, they're not going to react to you. And in fact, they're probably going to have a negative reaction to you. So there's very different mindset expectation levels of, if you're playing well or maybe you're not playing well, kind of the noises that you're going to hear and just understanding kind of what they mean. And obviously being ready. I see, I read obviously the kind of news about these virtual reality headsets that
we just recently talked about it. We have so many questions on what is being fed in these VRs.
We all have questions. But it's like, it goes back to kind of where the Ryder Cup is today. It's the no stone left unturned kind of thing. And, I think the hostility level next week is going to be interesting. Certainly for certain players, right? I mean, obviously, Sergio Garcia, obviously being a live player, and like at one point it looked like I thought he was going to be potentially one of the top 12 players in Europe, but really didn't have the year that he expected from himself. I was imagining him being on that team and being in Bethpage, because I remember being at the U.S. Open in 2009, and they were just pummeling Sergio. It was like I was like, this could be horrendous. But certain players are a bit more divisive, like the Poulter days. Poulter used to just absolutely get it from every angle when he played a Ryder Cup in the States, but he loved it. He had that type of personality where, Poulter feeds off any publicity, positive or negative, and he pours it back into the tank. But obviously Rory will kind of get the attention, and I'm trying to think what other players on the European team are going to get
John
the attention.
Rahm, Tyrrell Hatton.
There you go.
Shane Lowry's a pretty fiery competitor too. What you get him going?
Yeah, and I read some quotes from Rory. I think maybe was it last week at Wentworth or the week before in Ireland, and he was talking about the way you react to the crowd. If you start giving it back to them, you're in for a long weekend. So I think unless you can handle it, right? You get a Poulter who's enough to kind of thump the chest and take whatever comes at him, right? But certain players may want to try and fly below the radar a little bit and just kind of tip the hat and go, yeah. I hear you swearing at me and you don't like me, but I'm gonna love you right back in return. And
totally.
Yeah. So it's certainly interesting. I think definitely the mental expectation of kind of what's going to happen out there, especially for some of these. I mean, obviously the European team's very interesting. 11 of the 12 players played in Rome, but some of these guys have never experienced an American, a U.S. soil Ryder Cup, and it's a different noise. It's a different feeling, and you got to have some thick skin. And especially out there Friday, Saturday when you're playing with your teammate, obviously getting in your bubble with your teammate, getting on with it, keeping your head down, obviously trying to win your point, trying to play the best you can. I'm excited to see it. I think it's going to be something pretty special. It's going to approach the line at some point. I just hope it stays.
Sure.
Yeah, I hope it stays in the right. I think we all, as golf fans and sports fans, we all hope it stays on the right side of the line. But I hope it will. It will.
It's definitely a topic it's being discussed a lot, just with the New York crowd and how tough they could be on their teams, the home and away. There's a chance the U.S. team might get booed by the New York fans, and that wouldn't surprise anybody either. So that's definitely a storyline I'm going to be watching. But here, okay, so you were on the last away Ryder Cup winning team. This is back in Medinah in 2012. Out of the last 9 Ryder Cups, 8 of the 9 have been won by home teams. So you're in that locker room Saturday night. You guys are down 10-6. That United States team, you go back and look at that lineup they had over there. Most of those guys were at the peak or the top of their form of their career. And that was as strong of a U.S. team as we've had in a long time. I think the performance from the guys at Whistling Straits obviously was incredible, but that was a very, very strong lineup at 2012. So when you guys are getting ready for that next day, knowing that Sunday singles, the United States, and overcoming 4 points is a lot. I mean, did you think you had a chance? And what was the game plan going into Sunday?
Yeah, it was a really strange week. Jose Maria Lothobal was the captain, and I'd been on a couple of Ryder Cups where he was vice captain, and he was a phenomenal vice captain. But as a captain, he was a bit different. He was a little bit more cerebral, a little bit less emotional. He was very emotional as a vice captain. I remember him coming in at Valhalla. Seve had just passed away, maybe not long, maybe a few years before that, I think. And I remember him make a speech at Valhalla on the Saturday night. I mean, we were getting pretty smoked, but everyone was pretty much in tears, in the team room, listening to Jose talking about Seve and kind of how much Seve would give to be there, and Jose was not particularly fit himself at the time, and just talking about how much he'd give to be playing and be in our shoes, and it was very, very emotional stuff. And like I say, as a captain, he was great, maybe a bit more cerebral. But Friday we lost 5-3 And we came into the team room that night back at the hotel, and you just pretty much ripped us a new one. Out of
Was
the
that
blue, we were a
surprising?
bit like, it was surprising because, Jose, normally he's normally a lover, not a fighter. He's just kind of one of those guys who's going to give you a hug every time he sees you. But like we sit down in the team room and he chews us out, for our behavior on the golf course that day. He basically said, one player's walking down one side of the fairway, the other one's down the other side of the fairway. He said, you guys are a team. You need to act like a team. And I was thinking to myself, no, I thought I was pretty good with my teammate out there today. I played with Rory that day, but I'm not sure what particular group he was talking about. But he was upset about the way we had conducted ourselves as a team, and he basically kind of said to us, that next day that the two players needed to, walk down that fairway like they were one, and protect each other and play for each other. And that was kind of the message on Friday night. He was pissed off, and he was pissed off at what he'd seen. And we all went to bed with our tail between our legs a little bit. So then, fast forward like 24 hours, and we lose Saturday 5-3 as well. But, Poulter birdies those last 5 holes that afternoon with Rory. Rory standing the 18th green, that image of him just shaking his head as Poulter rolls in another 12, 15 footer, and just, goes fully in Poulter on it, full Ryder Cup Poulter. And, we go into that locker room 10-6 down, but like there is an energy in the team room, which was, first of all, no idea where it came, apart from the obvious, Poulter turning that match around. But still, we're in a massive hole, but we're absolutely buzzing. We're the locker room is jumping. The energy levels within the team was just like, for absolutely, zero reason. Like we had no reason to feel we were. It was like almost 6 ahead. No our behavior, but the energy in the team was just unbelievable. Go back to the hotel. They sit this all down, and he said exactly what I wanted to see in Team Europe today. And he was up and he was energetic, and it was really weird. It didn't make any sense. Like I say, mathematically, it made no sense whatsoever. But I'm not going to say there was like a Crenshaw moment where he's like, I have a feeling. There was none of that. I have a feeling. It was just like there was an unbelievable amount of energy within our team going into that Sunday, and it was a weird day for me because it was the only singles match I ever lost in a Ryder Cup. I lost to Zach Johnson that Sunday. He beat me on 17, but I remember being out on the golf course. I think I was around middle of the pack, maybe top half of the pack, about maybe 5th or 6th match. And I just remember the energy getting sucked out of the whole crowd. The whole piece of real estate just kind of started to go silent.
Was that middle of the day? Kind of middle?
Yeah,
like,
this
when
was
you're making
probably,
the turn, or was it later in the back nine?
Probably 2/3 into the day. I would say the last matches were making the turn. Justin Rose hadn't done his thing against Phil yet, but something, the match, things were turning. And I remember looking around at my caddy, Kenny, and I was like, whoa, that something is happening here. I think we were a couple down. So, I'm in grind mode trying to win my match, but like you could feel the whole place, the whole place just, the life just was going out of the crowd, and the noise was just changing. And
that noise is the noise. Can you tell a difference? Obviously, I imagine a US one hole you could easily tell, but was there enough of cheers throughout the course that you could tell that, hey, I know the life got sucked out of the place, but could you hear the European chants throughout the golf course at times? Were there enough fans to at least give you an idea that you got some support out there?
Yeah, I mean, it was more of a murmur, right? The European crowds kind of murmur, and the U.S. fans cheer when you're in American soil. So you can tell the difference between a European putt and an American putt, and going back to 2010 when I'm in the last match with Mahan at Celtic Manor, and Ricky Fowler birdies the last 3 holes against Eduardo Molinari, and I'm on the 16th fairway, and I can hear the American murmurs coming back from the 18th fairway. And we were like, oh, that does not sound good, because you could just tell. And I guess that day at Medinah, you could tell that it was European stuff. It was European momentum, and the crowd felt it like early. They felt it with about certainly 5-6 holes to go. With multiple matches still on the golf course, you could feel the atmosphere changing. It was pretty incredible.
Hey, when you're in that anchor position at Celtic Manor the year prior, and of course you just talked about Rory, flipping the match in front of you, you're in that spot for a reason. Did that captain, who was the captain at Celtic Manor that year?
Montgomery, Colin.
Did he tell you heading into that day, Graeme, I want you as the anchor. I want you to be the guy to be able to, if we need you, that I'm going to be able to rely on. Does the captain come up to you and tell you all that, or you just kind of find out when the pairings come out of where you're going to be placed?
Yeah, I think different captains communicate themselves in different ways. Some captains will McGinley in 2014 told me Victor Dubuisson and I and myself won our alternate shot match on Friday afternoon, and we hadn't played well in the better ball in the morning, so I figured we were going straight back out Saturday morning. And McGinley told me that I wasn't going to be playing Saturday morning. I was going to play foursome Saturday afternoon, but he wanted to keep me fresh because he wanted me to lead the team off on Sunday. So, I was disappointed because I wanted to get back on the golf course Saturday morning. But then all of a sudden he goes to me, but this is why I'm doing it, because I want you ready for Sunday morning to lead Europe off. And I was like, wow. But Montgomery was a little bit more like, he put me in 12th and he told me afterwards why he did it. And, he's like, well, you're US Open champion. I need a street fighter out last, and that's just the end. And that's what you're doing. Okay. I was like, all right. And I remember being super pissed off. I was pissed off because I want to say we had a decent lead going into the singles. I think we might have been
3.5. I think it was 3.5 points is what I read, or 3 or 3.5 is what Google was telling me.
Yeah. Okay. So we had a decent lead, right? Not quite the 10-6, but just a half points on that. So, so when I'm playing 12th, I'm like pissed off. I'm like, I'm going to miss all the fun here. These boys are going to be up in front. It's going to be all over. I did that once in Valhalla. I hated it. And, but obviously little did I know that, it obviously end up coming down to our game. Gosh. So I ended up having all the fun. Well, when did
it switch for you on the golf course when you realized, oh my gosh, this is all going to come down to our match on whether we win the Ryder Cup or not? It was 13.5 to 13.5. So I guess it ended up being 14.5 to 13.5, I believe was the final. So I'm not sure exactly how all that math would have worked out, but it was literally just you two guys between Mahan to decide the Ryder Cup.
Yeah, so if we'd have tied our game, then I would have tied 14-14, and America would have retained the cup. So that's basically like losing. So I had to win the game, but
had to win.
When you're playing kind of late in the order in singles, the rule of thumb is you just have to keep your head down and try and win your point, because if you start falling in love, it's a bit like leader watching on the back nine on Sunday. It can be okay because you figure out what you need to do, or be really it can really distract you. And the kind of the rule of thumb is keep your head down, don't look at any boards, and just try and take care of your business. So I'd done that pretty well for about 10 holes. I think I was a couple up on Hunter, and I'm lining up this putt on the 11th green, and there's like this 50-foot screen right down my line. I remember looking at this putt, and I'm kind of looking up, and I all of a sudden I start looking at the board, and I see all this red on the board, and I was like, I did some quick math, and I was like, this match could be huge, all of a sudden I go from having it's like 18 holes with the lads on a weekend. That's kind of how I felt, the first 10 holes, to all of a sudden someone just cranked the temperature way up, and a couple of holes later, it was 10 times more nerves wracking the back nine of a major. I'd won the US Open 3 months previous. So all of a sudden I get to feel both things like in close proximity to each other. The Ryder Cup was just like so much more intense because, that you're going to let down all your buddies as well as letting down yourself. Right. So, a couple holes later, I was feeling the most intense pressure I'd ever felt in the golf course. I think I laid the sod over a 9-iron going into 14. I had a really good drive on 14, good little 4 kind of dog legs around the water. And I lay the sod over this 9-iron.
And it was the last time you laid the sod on a 9-iron?
It was pure nervousness. I remember hitting the shot going, that's just born out of pure, jumpiness and nerviness. And I chipped it up and got it up and down for the tie of the hole and walked into the next tee. And I remember just saying to my caddy, I'm like, dude, I am like myself here right now. I'm like, I'm not sure I can get this done. And he said something kind of cliche to me, like, just focus. And I'm like, I tell you what, I'll carry the bag in and finish shots. How about that? And so it was crazy. And then I'm in the 16th fairway, and I hear the cheers coming back from the Molinari Fowler match, and I knew they're U.S. cheers. And Montgomery comes over to me and he said, do you want to know what's going on? And I'm like, well, I can see you jumping around like something bad just happened, so you might want to tell me. So he said to me, the tie in your match is not good enough. You have to win your match. And I think I was 1 up at the time with 3 to go, and it was weird. I was so nervous. It actually ended up making me feel better, just knowing the knowingness of kind of what I needed to do nearly focused me a little bit. And I remember actually settling down just a hair, and I hit a 6-iron into 16, and I made the putt, to go 2 up with 2 to go, and it was cool. It was a cool moment.
How do you settle yourself going to that next tee after making a putt, finding out, hey, you need to win your match to win the Ryder Cup? You get to 17 tee. That had to be one of the most difficult resets of your career, or you were still in flow state and you just go up there and just stripe that thing right down the middle.
I remember coming onto the tee to try and get me to calm down a little bit, because I just made the putt, and everybody's back at our group now, and all the players are back there, and everyone's going pretty bananas. And I'm walking to up to the 17th tee box, and I'm high-fiving people, whatever, and I'm kind of lifting the roof and all this shit,
kissing babies, the whole deal.
Kissing babies and whatever I was doing. I remember Montgomery. He probably had never really maybe seen me kind of that fired up before, and he comes over to try and get me to settle down. But I was okay compared to how I'd felt a few holes previous. I was actually doing okay at the time. And left-hand pin on 17, so I'm 2 up with 2 to play. All I need's a half, and it's all over. And left-hand pin on 17. The only thing you can't do is miss that thing left. And I hit a little skanky cut onto the right edge of the green, and that was just. It was like a 5-iron, So that was fine. And Mahan hitting his tee shot, and I remember looking up at it, and it was right at the flag, and I was like, holy. And my caddy goes, he's missed that, he's duffed that, he's hit it heavy, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, looks pretty good to me. But sure enough, it came up 8-10 yards short of the green, and then he flubbed the chip, and
next thing it's over.
It was all over, and
I can't imagine that feeling, man. That had to be the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then they all, everyone kind of stormed the green, and it was a crazy 5 minutes. And
just looking for a beer, just champagne, whatever you can. Just, I'm in. I'm ready for it.
I know. The pain not too long after that, but great times. I say my 4 Ryder Cups, special memory. Vice captain twice, which was when Thomas Bjorn was captain, and then I talked about Western Straits earlier when Padraig Harrington was the captain, and great experience as well, man. It's it's a bit surreal standing to the side and watching. Sure. I remember Matt Kuchar and I, we're at Paris National at the France Ryder Cup, and I mean, if there's a golf course, I'd won 2 French Opens on that golf course, and Kuchar
perfect
played,
for you.
He'd won that golf. He'd played well there too, and I remember Kuchar and I standing on the side of one of the tee boxes, looking at each other, going, yeah, you and I could have had a pretty good tussle around here. I mean, this would be our type of golf course, but it's definitely a bit surreal being vice captain. But, to me, just being in the team room, being part of it, I miss it. I miss being part of that ecosystem. I miss being part of the Ryder Cup culture. I get it, though. It wouldn't make any sense to have a guy like me or Poulter or Westwood perhaps as a Ryder Cup vice captain, because we really don't spend enough time with these guys anymore. Being on the Live Tour, we don't get a chance to go back and play the European Tour very often. And there's a huge amount of trust and communication that you need with these players to be able to, like I said, to have them trust you, to have them know that you've got their back. And, as much as I, would love to be there next week and be one of Luke's vice captains, I also get it. I understand that, there's a lot more to it than just having a lot of experience and a lot of things to be able to tell these guys. They have to trust you too, and that means being there and playing and being on the European Tour and being part of that group, and obviously spending some time with these guys over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I hope to see you as a captain one day. That would obviously, I would love for that to happen for you and just in your career. But one of the other things, just kind of closing a loop on your playing career in the Ryder Cup. You played with Rory McIlroy. This is, 2010 at Celtic Manor. This is his first Ryder Cup. I imagine there was a lot of hype around Rory joining the European team and what that could mean for the Europeans moving forward. And you guys got paired up together straight away. I imagine, was that like right off the bat? You and Rory were paired up together.
Yeah, we'd been pretty close friends since he turned pro. We'd play a lot of practice rounds together. We'd spent a huge amount of, we'd played a lot of golf together coming into that Ryder Cup, and he was the kind of the guy that we had to protect that week, because he was coming under a lot of kind of media scrutiny, because he'd kind of said that the Ryder Cup was just an exhibition match, and he'd kind of got himself in some kind of hot water regards the Ryder Cup a couple of years previous. So now all of a sudden he's on his first Ryder Cup and they're dredging all this back up, right? So, we knew we had the next superstar and we had to protect him. And as his friend, and as a U.S. Open champ, and I was becoming kind of the more experienced player at that point, and Monty kind of put me with him and told me to basically take care of him, and one of the practice rounds, you can pull the photos up. We all got the black Rory wigs that we wore for the team, one of the practice rounds, and part of that was trying create like a little bit of positive press, a little bit of funny kind of viral press to try away from the attention that Rory was. Listen, he built himself a pretty thick skin quickly in his career, and obviously, went on to do amazing things in his game. Sure. But back in the young Rory days, he was a little greener behind the ears, and it was still kind of way. And like I say, I was very proud to, be part of his protection system a little bit back in the early days, and be the big brother. And quickly he outgrew me and became the superstar that he is today.
I feel like every rookie, though, has a moment in which they're paired with somebody who's got Ryder Cup experience, to where that veteran can maybe pass on along a little bit of advice, especially if it looks like that player or that rookie looks a little pale or white in the face. You just be like, hey, buddy, it's either a joke you tell him. Was there anything that happened maybe in that first Ryder Cup where Rory's teeing off on that first hole and walking down the fairway, talking about being nervous? Did any of that ever come up in that first Ryder Cup in your experience playing with Rory?
That's a great question. Him and I, in the better ball, I always let him go first. I'd always
smash it, bud.
you smash it. You've got the old plotter coming behind you. I'll keep it in play. I'll keep it in play if we need to. I'd always just kind of like take the handcuffs off him and let him go first, and kind of be like, I've got your back if you need me, type thing. But that first Friday morning in Celtic Manor when him and I played, would it be better ball or four? I won ball, but it rained so hard that morning. Play got suspended after 5 or 6. It was like scuba gear. It was so. I don't remember really any stories from that morning, because it was like survival. It was trying to stay dry.
It almost helps because your mind is just thinking about keeping my grips dry. Just like, what's the shot? Where are we hitting it? And I imagine that the conditions probably help that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I don't remember much about that morning. That weekend was kind of a blur of rain and lots of water in that golf course. And I always look back at photos of that putt when I made it against Medinah, and my trousers are covered in mud and my shoes are just like, they're so dirty just because of how muddy that place was. But funny Rory stories. Playing Ryder Cups with him. So we played together in 2010 and then 12 at Medinah. Mm-hmm. We go off in the alternate shot on Friday morning. We're playing against Furyk and Snedeker, and we end up beating them on the 18th hole. But Rory's just driving it so good. He's driving it so far, and I was a little off that weekend. I didn't feel I didn't have like my AA game, and I wasn't driving it particularly good. I think I might have had the old Classic in the bag at the time, actually, but. I was having a little bit of an off time with the driver, so I play foursomes with Rory in the morning, and he's just gunning this thing, right? And say I'm on the evens and he's on the odds, but like I get out there in the afternoon and I'm playing better ball with him, and now I'm having to hit my tee balls. I'm having to play off my tee balls, and about the 7th at Medinah, I remember I'd hit 9 iron in the morning, and now it's the afternoon, I've got 5 iron in them. This hole was really easy this morning, and now I've got 5 iron, and like, what's going on? So it was pretty cool to play off that tee ball, I gotta be honest.
I imagine so. Well, as we close this thing up, we're heading into Bethpage just next week. What do you make of these two lineups? everybody expects this to be a very tightly contested Ryder Cup. Are you feeling the same? Do you think there could be a blowout one side or the other? Which way are you leaning?
I'm leaning towards Europe just because the 11 of the same 12 from Rome. I think there's going to be a great
11 and
synergy.
a half. 11 and a half. You can.
That's true. Yeah, true. 11 and a half. Well, 11 and a half of the previous 12 players. I mean, that's never obviously been seen in the history of the Ryder Cup, probably in several decades. But I think the synergy and the kind of knowingness those players are going to have, I think it's going to be a nice little X factor. I mean, obviously the crowd at Bethpage is going to be the reverse X factor. So, listen, the American team's awfully strong as well. And I mean, guys like Ben Griffin playing as well as he did last week. And JJ's clearly Scotty Shepard's, he's not. They're a great team, but I don't know why every time I look at that European team, man, I'll take some beating. What was I going to about the fact that they're there in Bethpage right now, that, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday before the tournament week? I was like, man, what are they going there so early for? I'm like, that is the longest 2 weeks ever. So I guess they're going there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they've got the weekend off. But I think Luke wants the guys to stay in the States, then obviously back on site again on Monday, which is
it's a long week.
Certainly, it makes for a very long couple of weeks. And I see kind of some upsides and some downsides to it. I think downsides being makes for an unbelievably long 2 weeks. I mean, you don't tee it up till the week of the Ryder Cup is an incredibly long week because Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, bunch of stuff to do, bunch of formal stuff to do, lots of media, lots of team get-togethers, practice rounds take hours. And by the time you get to Friday, you're just kind of like ready to go,
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, I saw some photos from Team Europe. They're getting all their signing out of the way, which is great because there is just hundreds and hundreds of autographs to kind of give for just memorabilia within the Ryder Cup kind of ranks, stuff for the American team, stuff for everybody. So there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of autographs to do. Getting those out of the way, kind of nice. And then one thing like I noticed at Whistling Straits, and I thought was a big disadvantage, and we didn't do any site visits at Whistling in 2022 or whatever it was. And the golf course blew the wrong direction in the practice rounds and then switched in the tournament rounds. And the American team had done a site visit and they'd played the course in the wind that we ended up seeing on the weekend. So the European team were incredibly underprepared for the wind direction that we ended up seeing because the practice rounds had played incorrectly. So getting some extra practice rounds, I think it's big. Takes the pressure off them next week a little bit when it comes to the actual practice rounds. But for a long couple of weeks, but I'm sure Captain Donald knows what he's doing. I'm sure the boys can have a nice weekend off and get away from it and obviously know what's ahead of them. But it's going to be a great Ryder Cup, man. I'm excited.
Me too.
I had a little offer to do some TV to kind of be there that weekend, but I decided that I'm not ready to be that guy yet. And, I'm going to leave that to the experts. And I'm going to watch it from the couch. I can't wait.
Oh, I enjoyed listening to the Open Championship. Incredible reviews from so many different people. I enjoyed listening to you before I got on air. Just a complete natural with that Irish Southern accent that I personally love and can definitely understand. Real quick, give me.
By the way, I love your great.
Thank you, G-Mac. Give me a player from each side. Let's say maybe not the Scotty Schefflers or Rory McIlroys of each team, but maybe a player that you think can play to a ceiling that maybe you wouldn't expect, a guy that could be a breakout star for each team.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bob McIntyre is an interesting guy. I mean, obviously the way he played at Oakmont this year, he's a guy I look at. Obviously we talk about Ludwig, how good he is, and Tyrrell. I mean, we know how good Tyrrell is. I think that's too obvious a choice. I think Bob is one of those guys. Maybe he doesn't get the kind of kudos he maybe deserves. To me, he's like a left-handed Shane Lowry. They have very similar games, very similar tenacities, unbelievable short games, and just unbelievable competitors. I used to play a lot of practice rounds with Shane Lowry. He's one of the most competitive guys I ever met. It didn't matter if we were playing table tennis or credit card roulette at the restaurant or a 9-hole practice round. He wanted to beat me really badly. I used to joke with him that he cared more about our match on a Wednesday than he did about the Thursday round. But I think Bob's a little bit out of the same mold. I think he's a tenacious match player. and I look for a guy like him to have a big weekend next week. Looking at the American team, so many guys that we know so much about. I mean, obviously
Sure.
Ben Griffin's a guy I don't know him super well. Russell Handling to me is a guy. I've known him for a long time. He's always a decent player, but it's amazing how he's kind of like a bit of a late bloomer, if you like. I mean, how old is Russell Handling? 35, 37?
Yeah, that sounds about right. 36 would be my guess.
Yeah, I feel like a late bloomer, but turned into an unbelievably steady player and a great player. He's always in the leaderboards at major championships. I look to him to maybe have a standout Ryder Cup next weekend. And, obviously JJ as a fellow Srixon player, just proud of the way he's played. And clearly his iron play is something pretty good. Scheffler level. Not many guys hitting their irons like Scheffler. I mean, his display at Port Rush. I got to watch more golf the weekend of the Open. Obviously being on the mic and just watch the guy play golf. I mean, it's an absolute exhibition. But
unbelievable.
I'm excited about it. When it comes to the Ryder Cup, I turn into golf fan. I sit and I can't wait. I'll watch every shot, and I'm pretty excited about it.
Well, buddy, I appreciate your time, man. If by the way, if you need me to send you, I got probably like 4 or 5 of these bad boys. If the driver gets off at any point in the next month or two, I can always forward you one of these. I'm not going to send you the cracked face one, but I'm sure they're going to have the lead tape on the heel, and it should be ready to go for a spin around.
I love that. I love it.
All right, G-Mac. Thank you, buddy. Go Blazers.
It was a good talk to you, my friend.
All right, G-Mac. See you. Thank you.
I listened to this podcast. It's really cool. And
all of our lovely fans and subscribers, but make sure you like and subscribe.
It's cool to see what you guys are doing. I know golf fans appreciate it, but we do too, so please keep it up.
For all the good people at YouTube, like and subscribe.
You guys have some good takes, so I'm happy to come on and shoot the